Hey guys, Thomas the Genie here, aka Mustached Shang, and I'm here to review the movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So, if you end up enjoying this review, then consider joining my Patreon page. There'll be the second link in the description below. Also consider subscribing as I'm trying to reach my 200 subscriber milestone. Alright, and I will remind you of the shilling at the end of the movie review, again, if you ended up enjoying it. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. So, Marvel has had, let's just be honest and say, a pretty lackluster lead up to Shang-Chi. And my latest induction into this was seeing Black Widow and seeing how poorly they put that movie together. So, with that worry, there was definitely a possibility that that would carry right over to Shang-Chi. The only advantage this character had going is that he didn't have a pre-existing character, unlike Black Widow. So there was nothing to hold on to say, oh, they ruined the character. However, at the same time, there have already been people who have been pre-watching the movie, as there tend to be, and there has been an over-exaggeration about how fantastical and awe-inspiring this movie is, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words they used, but I did catch that when scrolling across Twitter and hearing about it from other people on the YouTube sphere. I knew about the movie. I knew nothing about the character. I still only have this movie to go by for what I know of the character, so I will not be presenting this as a versus the adaptation, of course. I will just be reviewing this movie as is, and I'm going to be as objective as possible. Meaning, if there are good parts in this movie, then I will praise them and say this is why it's good, but I will also say if there are parts that are bad in this movie, which I think would get a lot of flack from those type of people that flock to give anything a good review to get in on the good old, the early access, as it were. So, there was a lot going into this movie. Let's just be frank and upfront about that. And I knew all of that going in. But I'm going to set that aside and talk about what actually happens in the movie, which will take a bit, and then I will, as I am recapping through, I'll say what parts, again, were pretty good and what parts aren't that good, and we'll come to a conclusion by the end. Alright, so the movie begins with some, I don't remember the time period they mention. I'm assuming it was a while ago, like ancient warrior stuff, where we see armies and we see some narration about this man who is able to move across the battlefield using these 10 rings, these ring bands, as I called them as I think they are to be. And the first little slice of combat in this movie, I felt like was something out of, and some people might get this reference, but I will mention it anyways. It felt very much like a Dynasty Warriors game, where you have the 1 versus 1,000 combat system. That is a video game reference for those of you who don't know. And in that game, a lot of people sort of get swept up by your combos, and it felt very much like a Dynasty Warriors, again, that very army gets swiped out by these weapons of one singular man who is doing the main brunt of the combat. And as we are sort of making our way past that, the movie does this weird, and I mean weird, pacing cut of montage of other battles that are, I don't know what the purpose of them are exactly. I want to say I still don't know after watching the movie in its full context, so it felt a very unnecessary little few extra minutes of just cutting to various other wars for some reason. Then we cut to 1996, where we see two men going over some map details. We then cut to him. We are following this man on his journey, this man with the 10 rings, who meets this woman who wears, this mysterious woman who wears a mask. She proceeds to attack her, and what I can best describe what happens next is what I like to call fight fucking. This is where two people combat, but there's this obvious sexual tension throughout the fight that is building up. That is what essentially happens, and of course, she defeats him. I say of course because this is current Marvel, and again, just what I have seen from current Marvel is that the female empowerment is still up here, and the male empowerment is not. It is not on equal footing anymore. The female empowerment again always gets that leg up, and it seems to be both within Marvel and Disney, which Disney owns Marvel, so I can't really say I'm too surprised. Nonetheless, the two of them, after their fight fucking, well, they have a kid, so, you know, I believe that term meets its full requirement of me using it. Anyways, it cuts to him a bit older, this baby kid, and this now mother talks to him about dragons in some sort of myth sort of way. Anyway, we cut to present day, and we are introduced with some light training montage, or light training and a music that just seems a little out of place. And him and his girlfriend named Katie go on this double date with this other couple, and they talk about how when they arrived here they were mistreated, and they were assumed of where they were from. And one of the four, the other couple, brings up the snap. So, meaning the snap, referring to another Marvel incident where Thanos did the snap, wiping off half of humanity. So, that is referring to this taking place after the snap and its very brief effect. Now, it is odd that the snap in different iterations of different stories seems to always have a different way of handling it. This was very brief, and they move right along. They don't talk about it any further. So, hard to say where this is, how far away this is. You would think the closer it would be to the snap, the more people would, be talking about it or whatever. But I'm assuming this takes place a little bit further along than that. Anyway, the couple, our main couple, complain about their job, which they work at a valet parking area. We then get some really harsh cuts for them cutting to a karaoke party and then having some fun, and then returning to their way home, and then chatting up with Grandma and the rest of the family. And then, but while they're making their way back to work on a bus, uh, they are grabbed by two individuals, or three, I should say, and one of the three attacks the girlfriend, Katie. Shang fights back as this random content creator, YouTuber, Twitch person, I don't know which one, starts to record this fighting sequence. And for all intents and purposes, this first fight isn't actually all that bad. In fact, I would probably say it's one of the better fighting scenes in the movie. Which should probably tell you that I'm going to have to tell you that later on there are some fighting scenes later on that are actually pretty bad in this movie as well. And in fact, when, the critics who sucked this movie off, saying this is a true triumph, as they put it, saying that this is the first Asian representation in a movie. Like, they went that far to say that, disrespecting movies before, like movies of Jackie Chan, these actors, Jet Li, in particular regard to martial arts based movies are the immediate two I think of. I know there's a few more, but point being that they make what I assume was a quick reference in terms of how it's shot to Old Boy, a Japanese movie based off of other movie, where it's one continuous fight sequence of the man being tortured in a hallway, and it's that the scene from Old Boy is a long sequence of him fighting in a long hallway, and it's one continuous shot as he's mowing people down. This was an insanely more briefer version of what I assumed was a reference to that, and is cut off a lot quicker, obviously. Nonetheless, as their fighting continues to break out, the bus begins to get some more damage to it as they're trying to also take care of the people while not crashing the bus, but the bus does eventually crash, not causing a little bit of damage along the way. Some cars get totaled in the scuffle, but this man that was chasing them grabs his amulet, Shang-Chi's amulet. Katie persists on wanting to go with him, so he eventually gives in and lets her tag along. We then cut to a flashback of him being trained as a younger kid, and how he was trained pretty much all of his youthful, essentially being trained as almost a child soldier in that sort of way, and a montage of that, and it is awkwardly, harshly cut to a food plane joke. So, after that sequence, when they make their way, I forget what the transition is exactly, but they argue over his name in the movie, of its pronunciation, why he changed it in the first place. So there's a bit of an awareness, I guess, because I guess people were already talking about that question mark. I don't know. Anyway, let's see. We then cut to another little brief party as they are traveling. They move to a location called the Golden Daggers, I forget I'm just gonna say the golden daggers. Anyway, the magic guy from Doctor Strange pops up and fights a fish monster. Uh, I've heard that this is supposed to be Abomination, but I don't know what Abomination is, so I shrug and say it's a fish monster to me, so I don't know what it is. Uh, what appears is that the magic guy from Doctor Strange is one of the sidekick characters from the movie, uh, appears to have a hold over this fish monster creature. Anyways, we get ready for Shang's fight, where he ends up, oh so ironically, fighting his own sister. We then cut to a brief flashback as he's trying to primarily talk to her, and she is very focused on fighting him. So, and as I mentioned earlier, remember what I mentioned earlier about female empowerment, she wins. Because of course she wins. So she talks about how she was the one who actually even built this whole fighting club in the first place, 6 years in the making. But the assassin group comes in. That's what I called them in my notes. I actually don't know what their group name was. I didn't catch it in the movie, so I'm just calling them the assassin group for calling them the current bad guys of the movie, ease of reference. Anyways, he tries to escape with her, obviously. His sister and Katie, I don't believe, is there with them currently. No, she is there, but she's like elsewhere, like in a distant way. And they fight over some scaffolding in the dark, so it's a lot harder to see a lot of this fight. There is some lighting in the background, but I can't say for sure. I can't say with certainty that is the best lighting that they probably could have had. And there's a lot more movement in this fight than there was in the first fight. So it's a little harder to gauge what is actually happening in this fight. Which, in a fight movie, with a martial arts based movie, the choreography and being able to see the fights is a pretty big deal. And keep in mind, when I reference the Jackie Chan thing, back in the day, you used to be able to, do the stunts, go through the entire thing, and it would look really seamless back then. Here we get a bunch of cuts, there's a lot of shifting, it's dark, there are a lot of things that, again, are placed here, and they hold the fighting back from reaching its full potential. So anyways, as they are fighting, Katie's like a distant away, she's about to be knocked off, so Shang is doing everything he can to get to her. She falls, and get this, just as she falls, the sister is underneath them, and gets to that location underneath where she's falling to catch her, Katie, and bring her back up. So that is very convenient, because if she was any seconds too late, Katie would have no longer been in this movie, because she would have fell to her death. But in the process, their fighting continues, and they are eventually shocked and grabbed. And they grab the sister's necklace as well, because she also had one. But her necklace, as I mentioned, is taken as well, as another shinobi, I call him a shinobi, I don't know what he is in the movie, but fights with Shang-Chi. This fight is a little bit better than that previous fight. There is a billboard that lights the background, so it's a little bit easier to see in that regard. There is some jankier camera movement still. It's not as bad as the previous one, So I would say it's a step above, since there isn't as much movement. And as they're about to end the fight, his father appears. So they are taken away. And as they are taken away, the two ladies are set aside so they have a moment to talk with each other. Um, and the sister goes over how she was self-taught, and how she says she taught herself by, I guess, just watching and then doing it better, as she puts it. Um, Anyways, we are told that the father is explaining his situation and how he was given many names, one including called the Mandarin. Now, of course, that is a reference to Iron Man. So there are quite a few references to Iron Man. They actually mention him a little bit later, and I don't know if that's leading to anything. This movie, like every other Marvel movie, has a tendency to be like, oh, like, what? Oh, is that the next thing? Is it another Iron Man? But Iron Man's, gone. So, um, I don't know what they're pushing towards, but um, it's always what's next, and I'll talk more about that as I come to the end result of this review, but we'll continuing on with what happens in the movie for now. So, he also talks about how uh, him and his wife gave up on the things they had before to have the kids, have Shang-Chi and the sister. Um, and according to him, he was locked away, and the son and the sister already know that she is dead. Uh, so the father places the gem things that he took, and he places them in the eyes of this dragon, so more dragon stuff going on, and it shows them the secret path to take. In this maze that leads to where he believes the mother is. Uh, and they're trying to, you know, stop him from making some sort of mistake. But he is very determined. So, they leave before him. They escape at some point. And they make their way to this bottom lake area where they meet some random guy who's sort of just brought into the movie named Trevor, and he is the one who directly mentions Iron Man. I forget what the exact context is, but he does mention Iron Man by name. Uh, Something about the Mandarin as well, I think. But this Morris creature, that is a very weird looking creature, starts to guide them. It just sort of pops up in the movie, and then it starts to guide them. So they escape the garage in a dark car chase, which is hard to see. They manage to drive past that, then drive through the forest, which tries to engulf them and kill them, but they make their way through by following the path. And on the other side, through a tunnel, they are led to this more mystical like area where there are these other mystic like animals, sort of just living peacefully. And as they meet the people are initially get very aggro against them, but eventually the situation settles down as the leader of the group meets with them. Apparently, this is their aunt that is talking with them. So I believe she starts to explain the ancient morph and what we were saying at the beginning of the movie, and giving that scene a little bit more context, question mark. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm assuming that's what she's explaining at this point. And she shows off that their current weapons are made from dragon scales. So that's pretty nifty. And as they are sort of in this encampment, Katie, this Chang's girlfriend, is set aside, given some weapon training, bow training separately, as the other two are training as well. This is where they are given their armor, the one you see on this poster here. So, Shang trains with his aunt, and as they are training, he gets more flashbacks of what the mother did for him in particular, guarding him and his sister from an attack from this other group, who I have no idea who this other group is at all. But the son, after the fact, Shang, clued the father in on this area where the father began to attack, and he was a little off-put by that. But in proceeding in doing that, he made very clear that he was given the final task to kill the main bad guy responsible, and he apparently did so. He carried it out. So Shang declares that he will indeed kill his father as his father trained him to do, as he puts it. So the father arrives with his army, and a war breaks out between the two factions. And eventually, Shang meets up with his father. They start fighting. The father currently has all 10 rings. He punches his son into the water, causing a huge explosion, plummeting him, I should say, into the water. And he should be dead from just that attack alone, but, I guess stakes in movies are just a thing that we're just gonna throw away again. Damn it. Other than that one fight, we were doing pretty good. But then that came along and just said, well, fuck the stakes, I guess. So yeah, anyways, the father goes up ahead to break the seal, where he keeps hearing his wife's voice. And unknowingly to him at the time, these creatures are escaping as he keeps attacking this wall seal thing. So the former enemies see that as these creatures are working their way to the shore, that they just attack anything. And after that example, the leader of the group says, we should probably work together with the aunt. So they do so. All the people decide that they're going to work together, so they do so. We get more of a flashback of the bomb and some previous stuff we've seen a bit more with a little bit more context as the sun sinks a little bit further. And suddenly, I don't know exactly how he pulls this off, but he summons a dragon somehow. A mythical dragon is indeed summoned by him somehow, and he's able to get back to his father. In the process of getting back up there, he manages to take 5 of the rings from his father and turns them from blue to yellow, meaning that he steals or takes them. And eventually he takes all of the rings at some point, but before striking his father down, he throws all 10 rings down in a faith of, I am not actually going to kill you. However, a bad dragon is unleashed from the seal. So I'm guessing that's like the ultimate thing from the seal that could have been unleashed. And it is so. And this creature pulls up his father, who takes all the rings, uh, briefly, and his energy, life essence is sucked up. So he shoots the rings back out and he sends them right into Shang's arms. 5 rings of peace, arm, I should say. Uh, and as Shang is there, he re-summons the good dragon to him, and there's a little bit of weird movement between the two dragons. It looks a little bit weird, and a little hard to gauge what is happening. But in the process of this happening, the sister is eventually grabbed because she's been doing combat and eventually is bad. Grabbed. Excuse me. Meanwhile, when things are looking rough for our heroes, our Shang-Chi and her, Katie, who had been practicing for with a bow for, she puts it later on in the movie, for a day, she gets a bullseye and hits the bad dragon right where it hurts, freeing them from their imprisonment. With ample opportunity and using spirit moves is the best I can explain it, he is able to split the bad dragon to pieces. So they are successful in their mission. As they return, they hold a funeral for the people who they had lost along the way. And then we cut from a moment of somberness to them bragging about what they did. So a pretty harsh cut from what should be a somber moment to them celebrating a moment with the couple we see at the beginning of the movie, and again with them sort of bragging about their story. And we get the return of when Shang-Chi and his girlfriend are explaining their story, and the other couple is like, nah, that can't possibly be true in a post-snap world, so what the fuck are they even, why would they even, I don't know. But if they had any questions beforehand, a portal opens up, and Wong, the guy from the Doctor Strange movie, the guy I mentioned earlier, reappears from a portal, looking to Shang-Chi, asking him if he has the rings. He nods in approval. Wong says, you have to come with me, setting up for something else that's coming up. And Katie ushers along as well. And they walk into the portal, and that is the end of that. And that is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So, I would say, overall, there are a few issues with this movie. Some dealing with the combat, which you would think would be the thing that people would want to highlight in a kung fu movie, quote-unquote kung fu movie. Or just a martial arts movie, I should say, instead. Because there's more mystical elements as well. And I have no problem with the mystical elements of this movie. I do have a problem with when a human person who doesn't currently have rings gets blasted into the water and then is suddenly in the water for a amount of period of time, not dying from an explosion, somehow manages to suddenly summon a dragon for some reason. That is a level of convenience I cannot simply ignore. And again, there are other action set pieces that just aren't as well put together as I think they could have been. The fight in the scaffolding was another example of this, of too much movement. It's in the dark, it's a little harder to see, there's a lot of cutting going on. So yeah, there's all that going on. In terms of the story, um, I think that there's some stuff going on here. I do. The father has a story. Obviously, he's trying to get his wife back, um, and he's very dedicated in doing so. He does not know the full extent of the consequences of his actions up until he's pulled away, essentially. Um, so his father went on a bit of a war path on the wrong side, obviously. So I would say a pretty, this an okay Marvel villain. I would say villain in quotation marks. Um, I should use the word antagonist rather in this context, uh, as that does seem to be a little bit closer to rather than being a straight up villain. Um, though, again, what he is doing is leading to something that could end the world. Again, I think that the unknowing part does lead some credence. I don't know. Anyways, as Shang-Chi as a character himself, I can't say that there is a lot to sort of comment on in terms of he just seems like a combat oriented character. A lot of his backstory is based off of being trained at a very young age and being trained consistently up until a point, suddenly feeling a need to not mention that in front of others, and then it all coming to unfold and learning these circumstances of his father and so on and so forth along the way. So, I would say, with some issues here and there, I would probably lean closer to an either. The 4 out of 10 is the score I'd probably give this movie. And the reasoning for the 4 out of 10 is that I do think that the issues overdo the few good things that are in this movie. The few martial arts moves and so on and so forth are overtaken by some of the darker, poorly shot fighting scenes. The character work does seem a little bit more focused on the villain than the hero, when it should equate to a little bit more equal. And really, that's it. Oh, and of course, the third act, just going completely overboard with its fantastical what characters can survive. I definitely do think that that also puts the movie more down than up. But, uh, you know, I didn't want to just leave saying, well, that's the end of that. If you, by chance, need some proper and still even current Asian representation, if that is indeed the thing you are looking for, then I would direct you to the video game Ghost of Tsushima. For that is a game that involves a son and his father in a much more beautifully made video game. And you can either see me play it very, very slowly. I'm still going through it. I have a backlog of Ghost of Tsushima videos ready to lend out. You can see someone else play Ghost of Tsushima, or most likely you should probably still pick it up. Again, it's one of the better video games I've ever played, so definitely check it out if you haven't already. But yeah, Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings is a 4 out of 10. For now, and that is my review for Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. And if you ended up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. The first will lead you over to my Discord, the second will lead you over to my Patreon page. Also, consider subscribing. Once again, so close to reaching that 200 subscriber milestone. Really looking forward to it. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.